It was a crisp, quiet night in Palo Alto. The streets were bathed in the cold glow of streetlights, casting long, stretching shadows across the pavement. The city was unusually still, the hum of traffic absent, and the sounds of distant voices muted by the calm of the evening. Elon Musk had just finished a long day of back-to-back meetings. It had been a demanding set of discussions, some about Tesla, some about SpaceX, all about shaping the future. But tonight, he wanted something different. He wanted a break from the usual routine, a moment of anonymity, however brief. For once, he decided to forgo his usual Tesla ride home and take a taxi. It wasn't a decision born of necessity, but a strange desire for a fleeting sense of normalcy. As the cool night air hit his face, Elon stood waiting at the curb. A black sedan pulled up to him with a soft hum, the sound of its engine breaking the stillness of the night. It slowed to a stop, and the driver's window rolled down. The man behind the wheel was in his late 30s, with short cropped hair and a plain, unremarkable demeanor. His face was neutral, almost as if it had been sculpted to blend into the background of any city street. He greeted Elon with a nod and a polite smile, but there was something about the man's eyes, too observant, too knowing, that made Elon feel slightly uneasy. "Mr. Musk, I presume?" the driver asked in a tone that was too careful, too respectful. Elon nodded as he stepped into the back seat, giving the driver a short, polite response. "Yes, that's me." The moment he settled into the plush seat, a sense of discomfort began to creep up his spine. It wasn't anything obvious, but the driver's overly keen demeanor made him slightly uneasy. His voice was polite, but there was an edge to it, something Elon couldn't quite place. The silence in the car stretched between them, the soft purring of the engine the only sound, and the streetlights flashing by outside the window. Elon adjusted himself in the seat, trying to shake off the feeling. He glanced at his phone, checking on some updates from Tesla, his mind constantly moving, always planning. But the unease wouldn't dissipate. The driver seemed to be watching him a little too carefully in the rearview mirror, his eyes flickering up just often enough to be noticed. It was a subtle thing, but Elon's instincts told him that something wasn't right. He couldn't place it. Maybe it was just his exhaustion, or maybe it was something else entirely. The car sped through the dark streets of Palo Alto, the rhythmic sound of the tires against the pavement and the occasional whoosh of passing cars lulling Elon into a half-relaxed state. But as the car turned onto a quiet, less familiar road, the unease began to grow again. The route seemed off. Elon knew the area well, and this wasn't the usual way back to his house. He glanced at the driver through the rearview mirror, his instincts now on full alert. The driver remained silent, eyes on the road, but Elon could feel his gaze in the reflection, always just a little too focused. It was like being studied, an invisible weight pressing down on him. The streets outside the window grew darker, and the cars fewer. The driver didn't speak anymore, and the hum of the engine seemed to become louder, more pronounced. Elon's grip on his phone tightened. He attempted to send a quick message, but the screen froze momentarily. The signal dropped, his connection to SpaceX's systems suddenly interrupted. Elon's brow furrowed. It was a small thing, but it struck him as odd. "Is this the usual way to go?" Elon asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice betrayed a hint of suspicion. The driver glanced at him briefly through the rearview mirror, then back at the road. "Of course, Mr. Musk. Just taking a bit of a detour to avoid traffic." Elon didn't buy it. He nodded, but his mind was racing now. His instincts were screaming at him that something was off. Every little detail, the driver's odd politeness, the strange route, the sudden signal loss, seemed too carefully orchestrated. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, and it wasn't just because of the driver's gaze. As the car continued down the darkened street, Elon felt the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't just an ordinary taxi ride. Something wasn't right, and his every sense was now alert to it. The night seemed to stretch on, the familiar city lights fading into the distance as the taxi rolled down empty streets. The usual hum of urban life had dwindled into eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the car's engine. Elon Musk sat back in the seat, his mind still tangled in the events of the day. He hadn't taken a taxi in years, preferring the control and comfort of his own car. But tonight, he sought solitude, a brief escape from the pressure that constantly surrounded him. The driver, a man in his late 30s with neatly cropped hair, had been courteous enough, barely speaking during the drive, his eyes focused on the road. Elon, though tired, found a strange comfort in the quiet, the stillness of the night amplifying the sounds of his thoughts. He glanced at his phone, scrolling through some recent messages, when suddenly, the car took a sharp left turn. Elon looked up, surprised. This was not the usual route to his house. The streetlights began to thin out, and the buildings around them grew sparser. The neighborhood felt different, darker, quieter, almost abandoned. His eyes instinctively darted to the rearview mirror. The driver remained unfazed, his hands firmly gripping the steering wheel, focused on the road ahead. His silence was too calculated, and it started to gnaw at Elon. Something wasn't right. The familiar streets were long gone, replaced by a stretch of empty road lined with old buildings and dimly lit alleyways. Elon shifted in his seat, his posture becoming more alert. He couldn't shake the feeling that the car was taking him somewhere he didn't want to go. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the discomfort was undeniable. Elon had always been attuned to his surroundings, his mind constantly calculating possibilities. But this was different. There was a feeling of being watched. He glanced down at his phone. The signal had dropped, and there was no indication of why. Could it just be a detour? He thought. But deep down, he knew that feeling was more than just a simple change of route. It was as if he was being pulled further away from safety, away from the city he knew too well. The silence in the car was now more oppressive, with each passing minute making him more uneasy. He forced himself to relax, telling himself he was just being paranoid. But then he noticed the driver's reflection in the rearview mirror once more. There was something in his eyes, something that had changed. The initial politeness was gone. Instead, there was a cold calculation, a hint of something deeper, something unsettling. The car swerved slightly to the left again, and Elon felt a slight lurch in his chest. It wasn't the turn that bothered him, it was the absence of explanation. The path felt increasingly unfamiliar, and yet the driver remained eerily calm, his focus unwavering. Elon's fingers tightened around the armrest. The realization began to sink in. He was being led somewhere he hadn't asked to go. "Everything all right?" Elon asked, his voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty he hadn't meant to show. The driver's voice remained neutral, almost mechanical. "Yes, Mr. Musk. Just taking a shortcut. You'll be home soon." A shortcut? Elon hadn't asked for a detour, and he certainly hadn't specified any alternate routes. His eyes flicked to the window, looking out at the growing darkness. The streetlights were few and far between now, and the buildings around them looked older, abandoned, as though the world outside had begun to disappear. Elon tried to dismiss the discomfort, rationalizing that maybe it was just his own fatigue playing tricks on him. But the feeling in his stomach, that unease, that subtle uneasiness, refused to go away. He reached for his phone again, trying to check the route or call his assistant, but the signal remained weak, nothing but static. Elon's brow furrowed. His first instinct was to try again, but the more he attempted, the clearer it became that his technology was being blocked. The driver was silent now, but the tension inside the car was thick. Elon noticed his hands were trembling slightly, his mind racing. This wasn't a regular taxi ride. The night had shifted in a way that felt almost deliberate. Elon glanced out of the side window again, the buildings more run down, the streets emptier. A sense of isolation crept up on him. He could feel his heartbeat quicken as the air in the car seemed to grow heavier, as though it were pressing down on him. He didn't want to seem paranoid. He told himself it was nothing, but deep inside, he knew something was terribly wrong. Finally, Elon's instincts kicked in. He couldn't sit passively any longer. The car slowed slightly as they reached a darker area of the neighborhood, the streets narrowing. He leaned forward, his voice sharp, though his body remained still. "Pull over. Now." The driver didn't respond immediately. There was a brief moment of hesitation, and then something changed. The driver's fingers tightened on the wheel, but instead of pulling over, the car accelerated. Elon's pulse shot up. The calm exterior he'd been holding onto was slipping. His mind raced, adrenaline surging through his veins. This wasn't just an ordinary ride, it was something else entirely. "Where are you taking me?" Elon demanded, his voice steady, but an undercurrent of panic began to break through. The driver met his eyes in the rearview mirror, a slight, almost imperceptible smile creeping onto his face. "To the place you were always meant to go," he said quietly, his voice low and ominous. Elon's chest tightened. His mind raced. He was trapped, and now the driver had taken complete control. He had no choice but to face the reality that he was completely at the mercy of someone who knew far too much about him. As the car moved deeper into the night, Elon realized with growing horror, this was no longer a simple taxi ride. It was the start of something far darker, and he had no idea who or what was behind it. The car slowed as it turned into a narrow, dimly lit alley far from the familiar streets of Palo Alto. The usual hum of city life had faded into an eerie silence. The only sound now was the soft, rhythmic hum of the car's engine idling in the quiet night. The streetlights above barely flickered, casting shadows on the crumbling buildings that lined the alley, their outlines blending into the darkness beyond. Elon Musk glanced out the window, noticing the change in the atmosphere. The street was deserted, not a single person or car in sight. The eerie stillness struck him immediately, a sudden knot tightening in his stomach. Something was off. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching the driver's reflection for the first time in full. The once neutral expression on the driver's face had vanished, replaced by a cold, steely gaze. The warmth he had shown earlier was gone, replaced by an almost predatory look, his eyes sharp and calculating. The driver's mouth barely moved as he spoke, his voice colder than before, now carrying an unsettling sense of finality. "You've reached your destination, Mr. Musk," he said, his tone devoid of any pleasantries. Elon's breath caught in his chest. The realization struck him instantly. This wasn't just a taxi ride, this was something far more sinister. He wasn't on his way home. He was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, trapped with a man who clearly had a plan for him. Elon's fingers tightened around the armrest as a surge of tension flooded his chest. Before he could process it fully, the driver's hand moved swiftly toward the dashboard. A faint click echoed through the car as the doors locked with a loud, definitive sound, the mechanism engaging with a cold precision. Elon's pulse quickened, and in a split second, he tried to open the door. But it was useless. The locks had been activated remotely. His heart hammered in his chest. The driver turned his head, looking at Elon through the rearview mirror with a chilling smile. "I'm afraid you're not going anywhere, Mr. Musk," he said softly, his words carrying an unmistakable threat. Elon's mind raced. He shot a glance at the window. Maybe he could break it or somehow escape. but the cold, relentless fear spreading through him made him hesitate. There was no way out. He reached instinctively for his phone, hoping to call for help, but as soon as he unlocked it, the screen flickered with an error. No signal. He tried again, but the phone refused to connect to anything. His communication was cut off. The technology he relied on, his safety net, had been hacked. His mind scrambled to comprehend what was happening. Elon's eyes darted back to the driver, whose calm demeanor only intensified the unsettling situation. Every safeguard Elon trusted had been compromised. This wasn't just a random taxi ride. This was an ambush. The driver didn't speak again, focusing on the road ahead, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. Elon's breath came out in shallow bursts, his body tense, his mind racing. He was in control of so many systems, built his empire on technology. But now, here in this quiet, isolated car, he was powerless. Why me? Elon thought, fighting the rising panic. Who the hell are you? The car glided deeper into the alley, the darkness outside swallowing the vehicle whole. Elon's world seemed to shrink with every passing second. And then, just as quickly as the silence had fallen, the tension broke when the driver's fingers once again pressed a button on the console. The soft clicking sound of the door locking was now joined by another mechanism clicking into place, a digital device, silent but unmistakably present. Elon's phone screen went black, followed by a series of rapid notifications from SpaceX's security systems on his watch. He was completely cut off. In that moment, the weight of his vulnerability sank in. The world outside had been carefully controlled, engineered to work in his favor. But here, in the hands of a stranger, Elon Musk was utterly defenseless. The car slowed to a stop, and the driver turned to him one last time, his eyes reflecting nothing but cold, calculating precision. "We've reached the final destination," the driver murmured. "I suggest you stay put." Elon's pulse quickened. He could feel the walls of the car closing in on him, the cold air inside now heavy with the threat of what was to come. With no way to communicate, no clear exit, and the driver's unsettling presence growing more menacing by the second, Elon had no choice but to prepare for the unknown. This was no longer just a ride. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Elon Musk's heart skipped a beat as the car slowed to a stop, the sound of the engine cutting out abruptly. The city's familiar hum of distant traffic seemed to vanish entirely, leaving only an unsettling silence in the air. This wasn't the neighborhood he had been expecting to reach. The streetlights above cast weak shadows on empty sidewalks, the buildings around them worn down, barely visible in the dim light. Elon looked around the inside of the car, feeling a strange sense of disorientation. The air inside felt dense now, as if the car itself was holding its breath. The driver, previously polite and distant, had stopped speaking altogether. His expression was neutral, but his eyes, those eyes, betrayed a cold, unsettling focus that Elon had not noticed before. The realization hit him all at once, almost like a punch to the gut. This wasn't an ordinary ride. It wasn't just an unassuming taxi journey. Elon was in danger. With a sudden jolt of anxiety, he glanced toward the rearview mirror, locking eyes with the driver. In that brief moment, the driver's gaze was no longer merely observant. It was predatory, cold, as though he had been waiting for this moment. The polite smile was gone, replaced by something far more calculated. Elon's fingers clenched around the seat. His instincts, which had never failed him before, screamed at him to take control, to escape. But the doors remained locked, the window too far to reach. Without any warning, the driver's hand reached out to the dashboard. Elon's eyes widened as the click of a hidden button echoed in the car, a sound that filled the space with an immediate, suffocating sense of dread. "Where are we going?" Elon asked, his voice trying to remain calm, but it wavered under the weight of the situation. The driver didn't answer immediately. Instead, His lips curled into a tight, unsettling smile. "To the place you were always meant to go, Mr. Musk." The words hung in the air like a threat. Elon's mind raced. The streets, the car, the driver, everything had been orchestrated for him to be here. His thoughts flitted between scenarios, but there was no escaping the realization. This was no random act. In an instant, the car shifted. The feeling of freedom Elon had always prided himself on, his control over every situation, was gone. The car had shifted into autonomous driving mode. Elon's hand shot toward the door, but it was already locked, and when he looked down at his phone, there was no signal, nothing to use for a quick escape. His heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was trapped, and the technology he had created, the very tools he had built to protect himself, were now being used against him. The moment he'd felt something was off had now become a terrifying reality. "Elon, don't bother," the driver said calmly, as if he were speaking to an old friend, not a target. "This is out of your hands now." Elon's pulse quickened. The vehicle's autonomous system was overriding every manual command. His tech, the very systems that powered his world, had been hacked, and the person responsible was sitting just inches away from him. "Who are you?" Elon demanded, his voice steady but laced with tension. The driver didn't answer right away. Instead, he simply looked at Elon through the rearview mirror, his expression blank. Then, in a soft, chilling tone, he replied, "I'm just a passenger like you, Mr. Musk. But unlike you, I know exactly where this journey ends." The twist hit Elon like a thunderclap. This was no ordinary kidnapping attempt, no random encounter. He was being tested, manipulated, and the true mastermind was still in the shadows. As the car glided deeper into the night, Elon knew he had little time left to figure out who was behind it all and how far this scheme extended. One thing was clear: the ride had only just begun. With a swift motion, Elon reached for his phone, fingers trembling slightly. But as expected, the screen flickered, and the signal was completely jammed. His heart sank as the device, his most trusted tool, was rendered useless. He attempted to force the phone to work, but it was futile. The car's internal systems had been completely disabled, making any attempt to call for help or access his network futile. The realization hit hard. He was trapped. The driver's previously neutral expression shifted, the corners of his mouth curving into a subtle but sinister smile. The atmosphere inside the car seemed to shift, the air growing thicker as the driver finally turned to face Elon fully. His eyes glinted with something more than just routine detachment. It was calculated, dangerous. "I've been tracking you for a long time, Musk," the driver said, his voice low and smooth, tinged with a bitter edge. "SpaceX has too many secrets, too much power for someone like you to control." Elon's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced, rapidly assembling the pieces of this horrifying puzzle. The driver wasn't a random threat. He wasn't some petty criminal or rogue agent. This was something far more organized, more deliberate. "Who are you?" Elon demanded, his voice strained with disbelief and rising panic. He already knew the answer in part. The driver wasn't just here by chance, but the driver didn't answer right away. Instead, he met Elon's gaze with an unsettling calm, as if enjoying the moment of realization. "You'll find out soon enough," he said, with a tone that made Elon's skin crawl. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as his mind sped into overdrive. This wasn't just an isolated incident. Someone was orchestrating this, and the stakes were now much higher than a simple attack. He realized that he had walked into a trap and the thread he was holding had just unraveled. In a single, calculated move, Elon gripped the car door handle, his fingers slipping against the cool metal. Without a second thought, he yanked the door open and rolled out of the car. His body hit the gravel road with a jarring thud, but he managed to land on his feet, adrenaline already surging through him. His pulse throbbed in his ears as he pushed himself to his feet, pain flashing through his body from the rough tumble. His mind immediately shifted into survival mode. He couldn't afford to hesitate. This was no ordinary threat. The night was still, only the distant hum of the city faintly audible in the distance. He darted forward, rushing toward the dim glow of a distant streetlight. It was the only source of light in this desolate area. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get out of there before it was too late. The entire situation felt orchestrated, like someone was watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. He didn't know how deep the conspiracy ran, but he had no doubt. This was just the beginning. As he sprinted toward the streetlight, his mind began to form a plan. He needed to get back to SpaceX's headquarters, to his team, and figure out who was behind this. There was a deeper game at play here, something far more dangerous than a rogue taxi driver. Elon pushed the thought aside. He couldn't afford to overthink. One thing was certain: he wasn't leaving this battle empty-handed. As he glanced back toward the car, still parked, he saw the driver's figure silhouette against the dashboard, motionless, waiting. Elon had escaped, but the sense of being watched, trapped, never fully left him. Elon Musk sprinted through the empty streets, his breath ragged and his heart pounding against his chest. The only sound that filled the night was the rhythm of his footsteps echoing off the empty pavement. The usual hum of Palo Alto's city life was absent, leaving him in a void of eerie silence. The dim glow of streetlights flickered faintly in the distance, barely illuminating the deserted path ahead. Every shadow felt heavier, as if it was closing in on him, a constant reminder that he was not alone. His mind raced as he ran, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling gnawing at him. What had just happened? Why had the driver turned on him so suddenly? Was he alone in this? Or was there something much bigger going on? The more he thought, the more isolated he felt. This wasn't just a random incident, he realized. It was part of something far deeper, more orchestrated than he could have imagined. With every corner he turned, the fear in his chest grew, but so did his resolve. He needed to get to SpaceX, to safety. But the deeper into these unfamiliar streets he ran, the more it felt like there was no way out. The city, which usually felt like home, now seemed like a distant memory. The space around him was too quiet, too still. He was alone, cut off from his usual support system, and it was the first time in a long while that he truly felt vulnerable. Elon's thoughts scattered as his phone buzzed sharply in his pocket, a sudden jolt of intrusion that snapped him out of his frantic thoughts. He fumbled for it, his hands slightly trembling, and pulled it out. The screen lit up with a message from the driver. A cold wave washed over him as he read the simple, chilling words, "You were never meant to make it out of this, Elon." His heart froze for a moment as he stared at the screen, the words cutting through him like a blade. The finality of it all hit him hard. This wasn't just a random attack. It was a message, a declaration that the danger was far from over. The tension in his chest tightened. The message was clear. He wasn't supposed to escape. Whoever was behind this had planned for it, and they still had him in their sights. His hand tightened around the phone as he glanced around. Every street, every shadow now seemed to hide more danger than before. Elon took a deep breath and forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't afford to panic now, but the creeping feeling of being watched was undeniable. His every movement, his every breath felt as though it was being monitored. The phone buzzed again. This time it was an alert from SpaceX's security system. Elon's eyes flicked to the notification. Security systems reactivated. Threat level detected. It was a relief to know the defenses were back online, but something didn't sit right. The systems had been compromised before. Could they truly be trusted now? He quickly scanned the data flashing on the screen. The threat was still active. Elon's stomach twisted as he realized that despite the security protocols, the danger was still looming. This wasn't just about a rogue taxi driver anymore. This was part of a larger scheme, and he had unwittingly stepped right into the heart of it. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing. They had been watching him long before he ever entered that car. His heart pounded harder, but this time, it wasn't just out of fear. There was something else too, a burning sense of determination. He couldn't run away from this. He had to confront it, and he had to end it. For SpaceX. For everything he had worked for. The final message had only deepened the mystery, but it also solidified one thing in his mind. He had to find out who was pulling the strings and why they were so intent on destroying everything he had built. With his phone still in hand, Elon took another deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he prepared for the next move. The game had just begun, and this time, he wasn't going to be caught off guard. The first rays of the early morning sun crept slowly through the large floor-to-ceiling windows of Elon Musk's office at SpaceX, casting a soft golden glow over the sleek, minimalist decor. The hum of the usual bustling energy at SpaceX headquarters was oddly absent today. The once vibrant space, normally filled with engineers and developers hard at work, now felt eerily quiet, almost as if it were holding its breath. The faint, sterile smell of coffee lingered in the air, but even that seemed out of place, too quiet to fill the room. Elon sat at the head of a long, glossy conference table, the smooth black surface reflecting the light from the overhead lamps. His fingers were pressed tightly together, his hands folded in front of him in an almost meditative pose, but his mind was racing. The calm exterior he projected masked the storm of thoughts swirling in his head. The events of the previous night, the sudden attack, the discovery of the shadowy hacker network, the encrypted messages, had shaken him to his core. But there was no time to dwell on that now. Elon was dressed sharply in a black suit, the sleek fabric contrasting with the disarray of his thoughts. His posture remained taut, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. His eyes were bloodshot from the lack of sleep, the sleepless nights spent poring over data, making decisions that would shape the future of SpaceX and his vision for Mars. But despite his exhaustion, there was an unwavering steel in his gaze, a silent promise that whoever was behind this would not get away easily. The team around the table was a diverse group of senior engineers, cybersecurity experts, and data analysts, each one focused on their monitors, typing rapidly, feeding information to Elon. The air in the room was thick with tension, but no one dared break the silence. There was no room for pleasantries now, only action. Every system within SpaceX's vast network was under scrutiny, each line of code and algorithm being combed through with the precision of a surgical team. The silence was punctuated only by the quiet clicking of keyboards as the team worked relentlessly, trying to identify any weak points that might have been exploited. Elon tapped a few keys on his laptop, activating Starlight, the advanced deep learning security system he had personally helped design. It came to life with a soft hum, its interface flooding the screen with endless streams of data. Starlight was designed to scan vast amounts of information in real time, identifying threats and potential breaches at lightning speed. The AI could predict patterns, detect anomalies, and flag potential attacks before they even had a chance to take root. It was SpaceX's first line of defense, but today, even Starlight seemed to feel the weight of what they were up against. Elon's mind raced through the possibilities. Who could have broken through SpaceX's defenses? What did they want? And how deep did the breach go? His thoughts flickered back to the events of the night. How the hacker group had accessed confidential data and the eerie, cryptic message that had followed. His jaw tightened at the thought. The attacker knew too much, and worse, they were not working alone. This wasn't just an ordinary hack. It was a well-coordinated attack from an enemy who had been planning this for far too long. The data continued to stream on the screen, but Elon didn't let his attention waver. He needed answers, and quickly. The silent hum of Starlight became almost deafening as it analyzed millions of lines of data, tracing every digital fingerprint, trying to track the attacker's origin. Every second that passed without a clear answer felt like an eternity. One of the engineers, sitting closest to Elon, looked up from his screen and spoke in a low, urgent tone. "Sir, we've got something." Elon's eyes snapped to the screen. The room fell silent as the data analyst zoomed in on a string of encrypted code that had appeared on their radar. Elon's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the pattern. This wasn't a simple breach. This was a global network. A hacker group far more advanced than anything they had dealt with before. The connections were reaching into SpaceX's systems from every continent, like a spider's web woven through the company's most sensitive data. And at the center of it all was one key question: who was behind it? The room tensed further as Starlight flagged an anomaly, a digital trail that led to an unknown IP address. Elon leaned forward, staring intently at the data. "Who's behind this?" he muttered to himself, but the answer was not clear. His mind flashed through the many potential enemies: corporate rivals, governments, underground organizations, but none of them seemed to fully explain the scope of the attack. A few moments passed in silence as Elon processed the data. He tapped a few more commands on his laptop, bringing up more specific patterns, more connections. The encryption was sophisticated, far beyond the typical hacker group. Whoever was responsible had access to technology and resources that even SpaceX's security system could barely trace. As the team continued to work, Elon's mind began to race with possibilities. This wasn't just about stolen data. This was about control. Control over the future, over space, over the very technologies that would take humanity to Mars. He knew they were not just up against hackers. They were up against something far more insidious. Someone had targeted SpaceX's progress, and they were willing to go to any lengths to stop it. As the hours ticked by, Elon's team continued to work tirelessly through the night, sifting through layers of data, combing through security logs, and analyzing every trace of the hack. But what they discovered was far more alarming than they had anticipated. This wasn't just a breach into SpaceX's network. The hackers, or more likely the group behind the attack, had infiltrated every layer of Elon's operations, gaining access not only to SpaceX, but also to Tesla's internal systems and even private communications that Elon had assumed were secure. The enormity of the breach became clear as each new piece of compromised data was uncovered. There were traces of tampered code scattered across different departments: engineering, logistics, design, even human resources. A portion of Elon's personal messages had been intercepted and read, and financial records had been manipulated. Someone had been watching him for a long time, silently tracking his every move, every transaction, and every decision. But the real question remained: who and why? Elon paced the room, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on him. His mind raced from one possibility to another, but all seemed equally disorienting. He had faced countless challenges in his career, from the collapse of multiple startups to the pushback from industries resistant to change. But this was different. This wasn't a simple technological attack aimed at stealing intellectual property or sabotaging systems. It felt personal. Whoever was behind this was not just after data. They were after control. They had targeted him directly. The feeling of being watched, a sensation Elon had been trying to shake off since the previous night, came rushing back with full force. The very room he had built for privacy and focus suddenly felt like a cage. He couldn't shake the thought that every movement, every word was being recorded. Elon glanced again at his phone. the familiar blank screen mocking him. There was still no signal, and it wasn't just the phone, it was his entire security network compromised. His lifeline, the technology he trusted the most, was cut off, and he was alone. The frustration bubbled up, but Elon kept it contained. He knew the risks. This wasn't the time to show weakness or let emotions take control. Instead, his eyes sharpened as his thoughts sharpened, calculating the risks and strategies in his head like a machine. He needed to know who was behind this, but more importantly, he needed to know how deep this went. Could this be just the beginning? Was there someone within his own companies leaking information? As his gaze swept over the engineers and security experts working at full capacity around the room, Elon realized the enormity of the investigation that lay before them. This was no longer about a rogue hacker or a single breach. This was about the survival of SpaceX, Tesla, and the future of his companies. The pressure weighed on him, not just because his companies were under threat, but because the vision he had spent years building, the dream of making life multi-planetary, was now at risk. If the shadow network had already infiltrated this deeply, then who else had been compromised? As one of the lead engineers brought up another set of compromised data logs on the screen, Elon stood still for a moment, his hand resting on the edge of the table. He could feel the weight of the investigation pressing down on him. The stakes had never been higher. Whoever was behind this knew far more than just his business. They understood his goals, his plans, even the personal side of his life. And they were playing the long game. This was far more than just a technological challenge. It was a battle for control. Control over everything he had built. Elon's frustration started to shift toward determination. The enemy had already sown chaos within his empire, but he wouldn't let them win. He would take back control. As the investigation wore on, Elon and his team began uncovering disturbing patterns buried deep within the data. For hours, the room was filled with the steady clicking of keyboards and the soft hum of monitors as the engineers and cybersecurity experts worked through layer after layer of digital chaos. It didn't take long for them to identify something troubling. Anonymous accounts had been siphoning off critical SpaceX data for months, if not years. At first, it seemed like a series of isolated incidents, small breaches here and there. But as the team dug deeper, the pieces began to fall into place, revealing a far more sophisticated and calculated operation. The hacker group, which had initially been a shadowy, faceless threat, was now becoming all too real. The Black Horizon was their name, and they had infiltrated every level of SpaceX's systems. Their digital fingerprints were so well hidden that it was almost as if they had been living in the shadows for years, leaving behind only the faintest traces of their involvement. The depth of the breach was shocking. These weren't just random, disorganized hackers looking to steal intellectual property. The Black Horizon was exceptionally well-funded and organized. Elon's gaze fixed on the screen in front of him, where the freshly uncovered data was laid bare. The scale of the infiltration was staggering. Every system, from engineering designs to the most confidential financial records, had been accessed, analyzed, and manipulated. There were traces of activity in places that no outsider should have had access to. Even the most sensitive projects, Starship, Raptor engines, Mars colonization plans, had been targeted. The walls that had kept SpaceX secure seemed to have been reduced to nothing more than paper in front of this unknown force. Tension mounted as the implications set in. This wasn't just a rogue hacker or an isolated group looking to profit from selling data. Elon's heart pounded as his mind reeled. This was an orchestrated global conspiracy. The Black Horizon had spread its influence across multiple industries, many of which had deep connections with government entities, tech giants, and financial powerhouses. The more Elon examined the data, the clearer it became. These hackers had insider knowledge, and they were far better connected than anyone could have imagined, The hacker group wasn't a ragtag bunch of criminals. It was a network of powerful individuals pulling strings from behind the scenes, looking to control the most innovative technologies of the future. They had the ability to strike at will, to manipulate entire systems, and their reach extended far beyond anything Elon could have anticipated. As he stared at the newly uncovered patterns, a deep sense of alarm began to settle in his chest. These weren't just the actions of a group interested in profit. They were strategic moves in a high-stakes game, and SpaceX was at the center of their plans. For years, Elon had been ahead of the curve, creating innovations that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. He had been the disruptor, the one who saw where technology was heading and stayed several steps ahead of everyone else. But this felt like something different, something darker. There were no clear lines between who was friend or foe anymore. Who was behind the black horizon? And why had they targeted him and his companies? Elon felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of helplessness. This was beyond just a technological challenge. It was personal, and it was much larger than anything he had prepared for. For the first time in years, he felt like he was out of his depth. The unanswered questions gnawed at him. Why had they chosen SpaceX? Why him? Was it because of his ambitions, his vision for Mars? Or was there something more? Was someone from within his own circle complicit in this? There were so many layers to peel back, but every answer seemed to lead to more questions, and each path felt like it could be another trap set to pull him further into the web of deceit. He had always trusted his instincts, but right now, they told him something was seriously wrong. The future he had worked so hard to build, the one that could make humanity a multi-planetary species, was being threatened. And the worst part? He didn't know who to trust anymore. The tension in the room was palpable. Elon could feel the weight of the investigation pressing on him. The stakes had never been higher, and he knew that the war for the future had just begun. The Black Horizon had made their move, and it was time to find out who was behind it. Elon wasn't going to wait for them to strike again. The only question now was, how far would he have to go to stop them? In the weeks following the discovery, Elon Musk knew that the time for waiting was over. SpaceX was under siege, and the attack wasn't just against a company, it was an assault on the future of space exploration itself. With the scale of the threat becoming clearer each day, Elon realized that he could no longer rely solely on SpaceX's internal resources. He had to act quickly, decisively, and on a global scale. He reached out to the best in the field: cybersecurity experts, intelligence agencies, and international organizations. It wasn't just about defending SpaceX's assets anymore. It was about protecting humanity's future beyond Earth. Elon was no longer just a businessman or an inventor. He had become the guardian of an entire vision, one that had the potential to change the course of history. His actions now needed to be larger than the corporation he had built. The high-security conference room at SpaceX's headquarters buzzed with urgency. Dozens of monitors displayed real-time intelligence feeds, satellite maps, and classified files that only a select few could access. Representatives from Interpol, the FBI, and other global security agencies were seated around the long table. Each person there knew that the stakes were as high as they could get. This wasn't just a hacking incident. It was a geopolitical crisis. Elon stood at the head of the table, his expression calm but focused. The deep lines around his eyes showed the weight of the past weeks, but his resolve remained unshaken. He was used to thinking on his feet, managing pressure, and building empires. But this was different. This wasn't just about rockets or cars. It was about the future of humanity. The room was thick with the tension of the discussions, and as the representative from Interpol spoke, the atmosphere shifted even further. "We have intelligence suggesting internal compromise," he said, his voice heavy. "We believe someone inside your organization or one of your affiliates is feeding this group information. It's likely that SpaceX's most trusted employees have been compromised, possibly without even knowing it." Elon's mind raced as the implications sank in. A mole. It was the last thing he wanted to consider, but it made sense. The enemy wasn't just on the outside. They had infiltrated the very core of his operations. Someone had been working against him from the inside. The thought made Elon's stomach churn. Could someone he trusted have been working with them? He had always believed in the integrity of his people, but now, with everything on the line, he couldn't help but wonder, how far did this conspiracy go? Who could he trust? A seasoned cybersecurity expert from the FBI spoke up, his face stern. "We've traced the intrusions back to multiple points of access within SpaceX's cloud systems. These aren't the work of some amateur hackers. They're experts, and they've had months to lay the groundwork." He pointed at a series of encrypted files on the screen. "The digital backdoors we've uncovered are sophisticated. These aren't just simple hacks. They've mapped your entire network." Elon clenched his jaw, staring at the screen as it flickered with various graphs and figures. The level of sophistication in the attack was beyond anything he had ever anticipated. This wasn't just about stealing data. It was a full-scale attempt to control SpaceX from the inside out. The team used advanced surveillance software to track down every lead. Their tools identified the digital backdoors that had been silently siphoning off critical data, not just from SpaceX, but from Tesla as well. The hackers had infiltrated multiple points of access across both companies, carefully navigating their way through firewalls and security systems, almost as if they had been working inside the company for years. The gravity of the situation began to settle in as Elon watched the real-time data feeds. The backdoors led to servers containing detailed research on Mars exploration, Raptor engine design, and classified communications about SpaceX's next steps in space colonization. Each piece of data they'd stolen was a fragment of the future of human spaceflight, a future that was now in jeopardy. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that this wasn't just an isolated attack by a rogue group. The Black Horizon was far more organized, connected to global entities with power far beyond the digital realm. Their reach was terrifyingly vast, and their methods were so sophisticated that even SpaceX's best engineers had been left blind to their presence. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of the table. The internal compromise had shaken him to his core, but he knew that it was just the beginning of a long battle ahead. He couldn't afford to look back at this point. All his focus had to be on the next move. He needed answers, and fast. As the room fell into a tense silence, Elon's mind began to shift gears. This wasn't just about catching a few hackers or recovering stolen data. This was about reclaiming control, not just of SpaceX, but of the entire industry, and keeping the dream of interplanetary life alive. If these forces were allowed to succeed, the vision of Mars colonization would be at risk. And with it, everything Elon had worked for. The representative from the FBI spoke again, breaking Elon's thoughts. "We need to tighten security, Mr. Musk. This is a global operation now, and we need to act fast." Elon nodded, his mind already working through the strategy. There was no time to waste. The team immediately began to formulate plans for a global counter-operation. The first step, identify the insiders, the moles within SpaceX's ranks. But the second, and far more dangerous, step would be to unmask the mastermind behind the Black Horizon. Elon knew that the only way to stop this conspiracy was to track down the hidden hand pulling the strings. Elon's fingers moved over his laptop again, typing out a message to his head of security. "We're going to find them, no matter how deep they're hidden." Late one evening, as the investigation reached a critical point, Elon sat alone in his office, the cool night air slipping through the cracks of the tall windows. The city outside seemed distant, its lights flickering faintly in the horizon, too far to offer any comfort. Inside the room, the soft hum of his high-tech systems was the only sound, but tonight, even the familiar noise seemed to echo in an unnerving way. Elon was alone, but his thoughts were never solitary. The weight of the investigation, the endless leads, and the unresolved questions that had haunted him for days now settled heavily on his shoulders. He stared at the encrypted message that had just arrived on his secure terminal. The message came through a deep, encrypted channel, a level of security Elon himself had helped build. He was used to receiving important data this way, but there was something different about this transmission. The channel was one he hadn't seen before, and that alone made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was unexpected and personal, and Elon knew this wasn't just some generic hacker group. It was a direct challenge to him, and only him. Elon's fingers hovered over the keys, his face impassive, but his thoughts already racing. The encryption on the message was sophisticated, as expected, but what unsettled him most wasn't the technical aspect. It was the handwriting within the message. The words were familiar, almost too familiar. "I know you're looking for me, Elon. But the question is, are you prepared to face the truth?" The words hit Elon like a hammer. For a moment, he froze. His mind went blank, trying to process who would have access to this level of information about his life, his plans, and his company. The message wasn't just taunting him. It was designed to make him question everything. Someone knew too much. Someone had been watching him for far longer than he had realized. He stared at the screen for a few moments, his breath catching. This was no longer just a game of cat and mouse. The message was a declaration of war, an invitation to face the truth, whatever that meant. Elon clenched his fists, feeling a wave of frustration surge through him. How had they managed to infiltrate his system so thoroughly? His mind was working overtime, trying to trace the source of the message, but the answers were slipping away, like sand through his fingers. The person behind this knew him well, far too well, and they were using that knowledge against him. With a deep breath, Elon regained his composure. He refused to let this game of intimidation get the best of him. He immediately activated Starlight, his most advanced AI security system. The interface flickered to life on his screen, its deep learning algorithms already scanning for any traces of this message's origin. The AI quickly connected to global surveillance satellites, cross-referencing encrypted signals, analyzing the unique patterns in the transmission. But the results that appeared on the screen were unsettling. The data led to a dead end. There were no discernible clues, no traceable link that would allow him to pinpoint the sender. Every encrypted line of code, every signal seemed to vanish into thin air. Elon frowned, frustration building. Whoever had sent the message was always 2 steps ahead. They had anticipated his every move, and worse, they had used his own security system against him. It was a bitter realization. The battle was no longer just about stopping the hackers. It was about something far deeper. It was about uncovering the hidden hand behind all of this, the one pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating this entire operation. Someone had been manipulating him, and now they were daring him to confront the truth. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers rubbing his temples as he tried to think through the growing chaos. Who could it be? Who had this level of access and power? He thought about his enemies, his business rivals, and the people who had opposed him in the past. But none of them had the capabilities of this unseen force. The message suggested they were watching from within, with knowledge that even his own security systems couldn't anticipate. The hidden hand wasn't just a rogue hacker or a group of tech criminals. This was a network, a global conspiracy with deep strategic roots. Elon could feel it now, the full scale of what he was up against. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became that this was not just a threat to SpaceX or Tesla. This was a threat to everything he had worked for. The room was silent, the only sound being the faint hum of his systems as they worked in the background. Elon knew he couldn't waste time second-guessing. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. The enemy was no longer hidden behind a screen. They were in plain sight, and it was time for him to find them. With a sharp motion, Elon opened a secure channel to his head of cybersecurity. "We need to escalate this," he said firmly. "Activate all assets, no more waiting. This is a global operation, and we're going to uncover who's behind it, now." The night had settled over Palo Alto, and Elon Musk sat alone in his office, the dim glow from his desk lamp the only source of light. The cool air from the open windows brought in a faint hum from the city below, a quiet reminder that life continued on outside. But here, within the sleek confines of SpaceX headquarters, everything felt different. The usual rhythm of his workday, calls, meetings, rapid-fire decisions, had shifted to an eerie, almost unnatural stillness. The massive room was silent, the only noise being the soft hum of the high-tech equipment around him. This was no longer the vibrant, bustling headquarters he had known. As Elon stared at the monitors casting blue light across his face, the sense of foreboding that had followed him for days deepened. He had worked tirelessly through the night, investigating the breach, but now a creeping feeling gnawed at his insides. The growing threat seemed more real than ever. Even in the silence that surrounded him, something was coming. Something bigger, and he wasn't sure how to prepare for it. The weight of the investigation hung heavily in the air. More than just technical expertise was needed now. This was a battle for the future of everything he had built. Elon's eyes flickered across the room before they settled on a terminal. A single, encrypted message had just arrived. It had bypassed every security measure SpaceX had put in place. A deep, encrypted channel he had never seen before. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cold glow of the terminal reflected in his eyes. This wasn't routine. Something about it felt personal, and that instinct tugged at him. He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a determined breath, he clicked open the message. The words slowly appeared, one by one, like a slow, deliberate confession, each letter forming before him. His heart skipped a beat as he read the first few lines, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. There was something about this message, something familiar that he couldn't place. "I know you're looking for me, Elon," the message began. But it wasn't the words themselves that shook him. It was the signature, a handwriting, a subtle but distinct pattern in the encryption style made his stomach churn. It was someone he knew, someone who knew exactly how to manipulate him. But the question is, are you prepared to face the truth? A cold shiver ran down his spine. The realization struck him like a shockwave, each word sending a ripple of tension through his body. This wasn't just a random hacker trying to steal data. This was a deliberate act, a message from someone who had been watching him, manipulating the very fabric of his work. The realization was slow, creeping, but undeniable. This wasn't about hacking anymore. This was personal. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tightening into fists as the full weight of the message settled in. His first instinct was to act, to push a button, call his team, initiate a countermeasure, but instead, he remained still, processing the gravity of the situation. Who was behind this? Who had the audacity to reach out to him like this, to threaten him with such a cryptic message? The more he thought about it, the more his mind raced. This was no ordinary hacker, no rogue individual trying to profit off stolen data. This was someone who had planned this carefully, orchestrating a message meant to disturb him, to break through his focus, to send a warning. Elon's face remained impassive, but inside his mind was already working overtime, analyzing every possibility. The message didn't just threaten his business or technology, it threatened his entire vision. Someone with knowledge of SpaceX's most sensitive projects was behind this. The truth was staring him in the face. Whoever was behind this knew more than just his company. They understood him. His fists clenched at his sides, the frustration building with each passing second. The realization that his vision for the future was under attack hit him hard. This was about more than just SpaceX or Tesla. This was about the future of human exploration, and someone was standing in the way, pulling strings in the shadows. But Elon wasn't about to back down. This was the moment where he had to step up, to show that no matter who was behind this, he would fight for his dream. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. He had worked his whole life to get to this point, to lead humanity towards something greater than just Earth, and he wouldn't let it slip through his fingers. He inhaled deeply, his mind shifting gears as he reached for his laptop. This was no longer about data security, it was about survival. The hacker, or whoever they were, had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated him. As Elon continued to process the implications of the cryptic message, his fingers moved quickly over his laptop's keyboard. The glow from the screen reflected in his eyes, highlighting the deep concentration etched across his face. His mind raced, trying to anticipate the next move in a game he hadn't even known he was playing. There was something personal about this attack. Someone who knew him well, too well, had orchestrated this carefully. With a quiet hum, Starlight, the deep learning security system Elon had personally helped design, came to life. The system, which was connected to global surveillance satellites, began its task of tracing the source of the encrypted message. Elon had always trusted Starlight to solve even the most complex threats, and now, more than ever, he needed it to work. The algorithms flickered across the screen, scanning millions of encrypted patterns, connecting data points, searching for any trace of the attacker's identity. But what Elon found was unsettling. The trail didn't lead to any clear conclusions. The deeper Starlight dug, the more the digital footprints seemed to dissolve into the ether. With every line of code uncovered, every decryption attempt, the trail disappeared. It was like the hacker behind the message was always 2 steps ahead, blocking every route. The pathways were increasingly obscure, tangled, and elusive. Elon stared at the screen, frustration and confusion mounting. This wasn't just a typical breach. It was something far more intricate, far more dangerous. Impossible, Elon muttered under his breath, furiously typing in more commands. He watched the digital patterns shifting in real time on the screen, the data flowing from every direction, but nothing was conclusive. It was as though the mastermind behind this attack had anticipated every move SpaceX could make, every security measure Elon had ever put in place. No traceable path, no discernible clue, just endless digital fog. His mind began to spin with theories. Who could be behind this? The hacker wasn't operating alone. This wasn't some lone individual looking to make a quick profit. This was far more organized and far more strategic. The group had resources, and they had the patience to plan for years. As Elon sat in his chair, the weight of what he was facing began to sink in. This was a far deeper game, and he was playing on someone else's terms. Staring at the screen, Elon realized that the attack wasn't just about SpaceX's data. It was about something far more insidious. The Black Horizon, as he had come to know them, wasn't just a rogue hacker group. It was a well-funded, highly sophisticated network, and its reach extended far beyond the digital realm. This wasn't just about breaking into SpaceX. This was about infiltrating global markets, government systems, and even private corporations. The more Elon uncovered, the more he began to realize the gravity of the situation. This was a global conspiracy, a shadow network pulling the strings from behind the scenes, working tirelessly to influence the world's most powerful technologies. His thoughts spiraled as he paced the room, the cold light from the computer screens flickering in the darkness. The more he dug into the Black Horizons network, the more his world seemed to fracture. These weren't just isolated attacks or a few rogue hackers trying to sell stolen data. This was something far more dangerous. They weren't targeting SpaceX for profit. They were targeting SpaceX because it was at the cutting edge of technology. The very technologies that were shaping the future of humanity. They were after control, and SpaceX was the key to it all. Elon's stomach churned as he thought about the potential implications. This wasn't just a digital war. It was a battle for the future. The Black Horizon wasn't just out to steal information. They were out to control the future of space exploration, energy, and even the technological landscape on Earth. And now, SpaceX was in their sights. He had always prided himself on being ahead of the curve, anticipating where technology was headed. But this was something new, something darker, far more complex. His mind raced through every possible scenario, but none of them provided the answers he needed. Who was behind this shadowy network? Was it a corporate rival, or had someone inside his own organization betrayed him? The magnitude of this attack went beyond his imagination. Elon took a deep breath, standing still for a moment in the center of the room. The weight of the responsibility pressed down on him more than ever before. SpaceX wasn't just another company. It was a beacon for humanity's future. And now it was under threat from an unknown force. He wasn't just protecting data or resources. He was protecting the very vision that had driven him for years. The vision to make humanity a multi-planetary species. "I can't let them win," he muttered to himself. "I won't let them stop me." The message from the Black Horizon had shaken him, but it had also galvanized his resolve. He wasn't going to sit back and wait. Whoever was behind this, they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. He would find them. He would expose them. And he would make sure that the future they were trying to steal, the future of humanity, was never within their grasp. Elon took a moment to reassess. The fight was no longer about just protecting SpaceX's assets. It was about defending the future of space exploration. He turned back toward the terminal, his fingers already moving across the keyboard, preparing for the next step in this high-stakes digital war. Elon Musk sat motionless, staring at the screen in front of him, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of his desk. The realization was clear. The situation had escalated beyond his control. SpaceX was facing a threat unlike anything they had ever encountered. The systems he had built to protect the company, the technology that had pushed him to the forefront of the space industry, had been compromised. His defenses had failed, and he knew that he had to act quickly, before it was too late. This wasn't a challenge that could be solved with just a few tweaks to the software or an adjustment to the security system. The battle ahead would demand more than his usual arsenal of technological tools. This time, it was about something deeper: trust, strategy, and alliances. Elon didn't waste a second. He reached out to his global network of cybersecurity experts, intelligence agencies, and even military-grade security teams from around the world. He knew that this wasn't just about protecting data anymore. It was about protecting the future of humanity. The very vision of Mars exploration that he had dedicated his life to was now at risk. The stakes were higher than ever before. Within hours, the best minds from across the globe were gathered in a high-security war room at SpaceX's headquarters. The walls of the room were lined with high-tech screens, and the air was thick with the hum of monitors and devices as teams worked in synchronized harmony. It was a rare sight to see such a diverse group of people all in one place. Governments, private sector, military, all unified under the singular goal of protecting what Elon had created. Despite the urgency of the situation, Elon stood at the head of the room, his expression calm, but his focus sharper than ever. The usual confident, quiet demeanor that had earned him respect was now tinged with an edge, a determination not just to protect SpaceX, but to protect everything he had built. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was a fight for survival, and it was no longer only about technology. The future of SpaceX, Tesla, and the dream of a multi-planetary future was on the line. Elon's entire vision for humanity's survival beyond Earth depended on the outcome of this battle. As the security teams began to outline their plans, Elon's mind worked at an even quicker pace. He was already a step ahead. He knew the key was not just responding to the attacks, but predicting the enemy's next moves. He activated Starlight, the deep learning security system he had personally developed. The system was powerful, but he knew that this wasn't just about neutralizing the hackers. It was about outthinking them. The enemy, the Black Horizon, had already demonstrated an ability to stay several steps ahead. They were highly organized, sophisticated, and well-funded. They didn't just attack SpaceX's systems. They had carefully studied every weakness, every vulnerability. The war wasn't simply about having the best technology. It was about staying one step ahead in a game where the rules were being rewritten in real time. Elon had designed Starlight to predict threats, but this attack was different. The catalyst, the mastermind behind it all, had anticipated the moves that Elon would make, knowing that his technology was sophisticated but still human, and humans could be outsmarted. As the team began to dive deeper into the investigation, Elon used Starlight and other AI tools to help map out the next phase of their strategy. Every move was calculated, every decision analyzed for potential consequences. They weren't just going to fight back, they were going to take the battle directly to the enemy. They would track down the network, infiltrate it, and neutralize the threat from within. But Elon knew it wouldn't be that simple. The enemy was too adept. The catalyst had already anticipated their moves, and SpaceX's security systems had been compromised on a scale that felt almost personal. It wasn't just about stopping an external attack. It was about dismantling an entire network that had been operating in the shadows for years, feeding off every piece of valuable data they could get their hands on. The tension in the room escalated as the team worked relentlessly to locate the enemy's servers, unraveling the vast web of encrypted communications and digital backdoors that had been silently infecting every layer of SpaceX's operations. Elon's mind raced with strategies, his thoughts jumping from one idea to another, calculating every possible outcome. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered. A highly coordinated group, not just hackers, but a network of powerful individuals pulling strings from behind the scenes. Elon felt the weight of the challenge. This wasn't just about technology, it was about control. The Black Horizon wasn't just stealing data, they were trying to take everything Elon had worked for, control the future of space, and disrupt the very technologies he was working to develop. The battle was reaching its climax, and Elon could feel the final confrontation coming. He wasn't just fighting to protect SpaceX's assets, he was fighting for the future of humanity, for Mars, for the vision that had driven him to the brink of exhaustion. Elon's jaw tightened. He had to finish this. He had to take the fight to the enemy and outsmart them. The final phase of the plan was set in motion. Elon's eyes hardened with determination. The world's future didn't belong in the hands of shadowy organizations. It belonged to humanity, and he was going to ensure that SpaceX was the one to lead that charge, no matter what. The final battle was set in a high-tech underground facility, hidden beneath layers of encryption and digital camouflage that had made it nearly invisible to the outside world. It was a place so well secured that only the most elite, well-equipped hackers would dare try to infiltrate it. The space was cold and sterile, the walls lined with sleek glowing panels displaying encrypted data streams and surveillance footage. The hum of advanced machinery resonated through the facility, filling the air with an unsettling tension. Elon and his team of experts, cybersecurity professionals and elite tactical agents, had made their way through this facility using a series of advanced hacking tools designed to bypass even the tightest security protocols. Their infiltration was swift and silent, yet there was a growing sense of unease as they neared their destination. They had tracked the catalyst, the mastermind behind the Black Horizon, to this very location, and now they were about to confront the elusive figure responsible for orchestrating everything that had been happening. As they made their way deeper into the facility, the tension in the air grew thick. Each step seemed heavier than the last, and every corner they turned, every access point they bypassed, only brought them closer to their target. Elon's senses were on high alert, his body poised and ready for action, but his mind remained sharp, calculating. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The final door slid open to reveal a dark, almost minimalist room. The only light came from the flickering of monitors and the soft glow of a series of high-end computing systems, tools that Elon had created, now twisted and manipulated by the enemy. At the center of the room stood the catalyst, the figure that had evaded him for so long. The mind behind the Black Horizon now stood before him. The man was calm, his posture immaculate, showing no sign of the tension that had gripped Elon and his team. The catalyst didn't even flinch as Elon stepped forward, his presence almost otherworldly in the cold, sterile space. His eyes were clear, and his face remained impassive, betraying no hint of fear or anxiety. There was no anger, no rage in his eyes, only a quiet, measured confidence that only someone with absolute control could possess. "You've done well to get this far, Musk," the catalyst said, his voice low and almost mocking. It was as though the words didn't matter, as though he already knew the outcome. "But you've always been a step behind. You were never meant to succeed. SpaceX, your vision for Mars, it's all just a distraction." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "The true power lies in control, and we hold it now." Elon's heart tightened as the words echoed through the room. This was the moment he had feared, the confrontation with the mastermind, the person who had manipulated and orchestrated the chaos that had nearly destroyed everything he had built. But Elon's resolve never wavered. His mind quickly analyzed the situation, parsing every word, every movement. He stepped forward, his gaze locked onto the catalyst, his voice firm and unwavering. "You've made one mistake," Elon said, his tone sharp with authority. "You underestimate me." It was the first crack in the catalyst's calm exterior. The arrogance in his smirk began to fade, replaced by a flash of irritation in his eyes. He moved slightly, as if to reassert control, but it was too late. Elon had already made his move. At that exact moment, Starlight, SpaceX's deep learning security AI, activated. The system Elon had designed, now working in real time to counteract everything the catalyst had built. The AI swarmed through the systems, bypassing their defenses, isolating the intrusions that the catalyst had planted. The facility's digital infrastructure began to shut down. Monitors flickered and went dark. The soft hum of the machinery halted as its power source was cut off. The complex system that had been hijacked for so long was now being reset, rendering the catalyst's hold over the facility useless. The catalyst's arrogant smirk evaporated, replaced by a flash of disbelief. He rushed to the nearest control panel, his fingers working furiously across the keys, but it was already too late. Starlight had neutralized the systems, and the digital fortress the catalyst had constructed began to crumble. He slammed his fist on the console in frustration. The control he had wielded so effortlessly was now slipping from his grasp, and it was clear in his eyes. He knew this battle was lost. Elon stood still, his posture unwavering as he watched the unfolding chaos. The fight wasn't just won in this room. It was won in the digital space, in the battle of wits. The Black Horizon's reign of control was over, and it was all thanks to the system Elon had built. The catalyst turned back to face Elon, his face now devoid of the calm arrogance he had worn throughout their confrontation. "You may have won this, Musk," he said bitterly, but his voice lacked the venom it had once held. "But this is far from over. We were just one part of something much larger. You can't stop what's already in motion." Elon stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with resolve. "You'll never control this world, and neither will anyone else." His eyes locked with the catalyst's. "SpaceX's mission will never be theirs to dictate. Not now, not ever." With the facility's security systems completely neutralized and the catalyst exposed, Elon gave a single nod to his team, signaling that it was time to end this confrontation once and for all. The room was silent except for the soft clicking of keyboards as Elon's team worked quickly to secure SpaceX's systems. The catalyst's network, once a towering fortress of control, was now reduced to nothing. The threat had been neutralized, but Elon knew this was just a temporary victory. Standing at the head of the room, Elon surveyed the exhausted but focused team. His expression remained calm, though his mind raced with the implications. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The catalyst had underestimated him, but this enemy was more than just a hacker. It was part of something much larger, something global. Elon's eyes never wavered. "We've won this round, but the fight is not over," he said, his voice firm. "Prepare for what comes next." He couldn't afford to relax. This was no longer just about protecting SpaceX's data. It was about safeguarding the future. The global conspiracy still loomed, and SpaceX's mission, his mission for a multi-planetary future, was under constant threat. As the team continued their work, Elon's mind shifted toward the next steps. The infiltration was far deeper than anyone realized. He couldn't afford to wait for another breach. They would need to stay several steps ahead of this hidden force. The battle might have been won, but the war for the future of humanity was just beginning. The days following the confrontation were filled with a mix of relief and reflection. Elon Musk stood alone at SpaceX's observation deck, gazing up at the distant sky. Starship soared higher, its engines roaring as it cut through the clouds with relentless power. The spacecraft that had once been a dream, an almost impossible vision, was now a tangible reality. Elon watched it climb, his heart swelling with pride, but his mind was already far ahead. For the first time in days, the tension seemed to lift from his shoulders. The catalyst had been defeated, and the threat had been neutralized. For now. The team had accomplished what many thought impossible, thwarting a well-coordinated global conspiracy, but Elon knew that the work was far from over. SpaceX's vision for Mars, for humanity's future, was still alive, but with each victory, the stakes seemed to grow more complicated, more uncertain. He looked out over the horizon, the vastness of the night sky now filled with the fading silhouette of Starship, the rocket disappearing into the stars. It wasn't just about Mars anymore. It was about securing a future for humanity, a future that had just become more vulnerable than ever. The battle for control, for innovation, had only just begun. The catalyst's defeat was a significant moment, yes, but it was merely a temporary setback in a war that would unfold over years to come. The enemy was still out there, operating from the shadows, waiting for the next opening. Elon knew the true fight wasn't over. It would never truly be over as long as there were forces that sought to control the future of space exploration, or worse, prevent it altogether. But as he stood there, watching the last remnants of the rocket disappear into the cosmos, a faint smile tugged at his lips. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a moment of peace. "The journey to Mars has only just begun," Elon muttered softly to himself, the words a promise, a challenge to the world and to himself. The future was unpredictable, filled with risks, but the vision of what humanity could achieve kept him focused. His eyes remained fixed on the stars above, knowing that this journey was as much about the human spirit as it was about technology. The obstacles ahead would be daunting, and the threats more unpredictable than ever, but he was ready to face whatever came next. With that, Elon turned, his face now set with an unyielding resolve. He didn't have all the answers, there were still so many uncertainties. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to stop now. He would push forward, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in the impossible. The mission to Mars wasn't just about reaching the red planet, it was about securing humanity's future beyond Earth. Elon Musk stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges awaited, knowing that this journey would take everything he had, and more. But he was no longer just the man who had built rockets, he was the man who would lead humanity into the stars.